We've been living in New Zealand 12 years, and although we consider ourselves local, we can't really say we're true Kiwi. But this guy that you're about to meet is. What does it take to become a Kiwi? I mean, I know that's a huge question, but...
What is it?
Yeah, I want to be a Kiwi.
Well, what it takes...
You're going to meet Gordy. He's 5th generation Kiwi New Zealand, and he is here to give you some really good stories on what it takes to be a Kiwi in New Zealand.
It's a Drama, coming to you from Taranaki, New Zealand.
Hello.
Daddy, I love him!
Weather takes you.
Right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Hello and welcome to the It's a Drama podcast. I'm Liz.
And I'm Brian.
And if you haven't been to our channel before, we're husband and wife. We talk everything about New Zealand, about travel, about life in New Zealand. And today we are talking to a real life Kiwi bloke.
Someone who's been in New Zealand land for a long time.
Yes,
Yep.
5th generation New Zealander.
Yep.
I'll tell you why we're talking to him. So he was listening to a podcast of ours on YouTube, or watching a podcast, and he wrote in the comments, you should get a real life New Zealander or an old school New Zealander on there. Old school Kiwi, I think he said. Yeah, you should get an old school Kiwi on your channel. So not to take up the challenge, I said, come on then, come forward and let's have a chat.
And he did.
And he did.
Yeah.
So hats off to him. You know, he was like that about it. He said, oh, should I, shouldn't I? And I'm so grateful he did, because this is the sort of stuff that you cannot know about New Zealand unless you have been in New Zealand a long, long time.
Yeah, and it's been passed down and passed down.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Yep.
So you are going to love this show. Gordy, thank you so much for agreeing to doing this with us. And let's jump in and meet Gordy. Hello, and welcome, Gordy, to the It's a Drama podcast. I'm so excited to have you here, and I just want to give you a huge thank you for joining us on the show. I just want to say this is the most bizarre and wonderful experience, because we did a podcast on YouTube, and you left a comment saying, you should get an old school Kiwi on there and have a chat with you. And I was like, okay, how about you? And me and you have been backwards and forwards with our emails corresponding. And you very kindly agreed to come onto the show and just give us a perspective of being a New Zealander, being a Kiwi. We've got lots that we're going to dive into, but first of all, can I just ask you to introduce yourself and say hi and let us know who you are? And
Okay, I'm Gordon, but in New Zealand parlance, everybody calls me Gordy, because that's people shorten names in New Zealand. I have been around all my life in New Zealand, with a few trips overseas, of course, because every New Zealander has to have the OE experience. The jobs I've done have been wide and varied. I've worked in coal mines, I've worked in corrections, I've worked in defence, I've worked in ACC, and this is in connection with health and safety, and also as an HR manager. So I've travelled practically every road in the country. I have wide connections with many people, and consider myself a genuine Kiwi.
a genuine Kiwi, that's lovely, isn't it?
Whereabouts do you live in New Zealand?
I live in Wellington.
Wellington.
Right, yeah.
Right. For the people who from the USA, that's the capital of New Zealand.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
We know that.
To be honest, I just wanted to get you and say, Gordy, what does it mean to be a Kiwi? And I tried saying that to you, and you were like, Liz, come on, slow down. It is a massive subject. So tell me about New Zealand's geographical and...
geographical location in the world, like you're saying. And let's go for like a little bit of the background and the history.
Yeah, that would be great, Gordy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, to be a Kiwi, you have to understand where New Zealand sits in the world. This is probably a bit hard for some people to understand, because a lot of people leave New Zealand off maps, so that makes it a bit hard to find it. But if you look in the southwest Pacific, there's a couple of little islands that sit about 1,200 miles from the nearest piece of land. It's a socially isolated and geographically isolated country. The islands are pretty big, I have to say, but they're still islands. The country is formed by the Australian tectonic plate hitting the southwest Pacific plate, which creates a unique geographical landscape. We've got mountains and we've got volcanoes and we've got earthquakes. The country is situated in what's known as the Roaring Forties, which means that there's a lot of wind in a lot of places, brings a lot of rain. There's not much between the bottom of the South Island and Antarctica, which means you can practically smell the penguins as the smell comes up. It's pretty darn cold down there. So you're looking at a country that is geographically very isolated, and that goes to a part of the New Zealand history. New Zealand, being in the bottom of the Southwest Pacific, wasn't discovered by anybody until about the 14th century. Indeed, it was the last large major piece of land discovered by humans, and the Polynesians noted birds flying and thought, those suckers must have come from somewhere. Let's find out. Into the canoes, boom, down and discovered New Zealand. And they were quite happy here for a couple of centuries until the Europeans arrived. Nothing much happened until the beginning of the 19th century, when basically Australians who showed some initiative popped over to New Zealand and started timber industry and selling muskets and booze to the natives as parlance of the time. By the beginning of the 20th century, New Zealand only had about 1 million people, but by the start of the 21st, we had 5 million. So historically, it's a very new country, a lot of people coming in a very short amount of time. There's no significant long culture or history such as you might find in other parts of the world. And we all sort of rub along together because it's a 3-hour flight to any other piece of land in the world. So that's basically, if you understand that, you're starting to understand what it means to be a Kiwi.
That is a wonderful description. That has just summed it up perfectly, hasn't it? Thank you so much.
History in 2 minutes.
Yeah. How do you know all that? Did you just practice saying it, or did you just know? Is all that information in your head, or?
It would be. If
I just know it.
You just know it.
I've been around a long time.
Yeah. And also, you told me that you're 5th generation Kiwi, aren't you? It's just. Tell me about that.
The first person in the family to arrive was a missionary paid for by the Missionary Society, and they went to Australia in the 1830s. They were sent to New Zealand in the late 1830s, got his name on the Treaty of Waitangi, which is a foundation document between the Maori and the Europeans at the time. Subsequent members of the family arrived in the 1850s and the 1860s, where they promptly did what every other colonial person did, took large amounts of land for small amounts of money and grew wool. They became farmers. The Johnny-come-latelys of the family came in the 1880s when they came across for the gold rushes and promptly deserted ship in the South Island to head to the gold fields. Like everybody did, it was pretty common in those days. So since then, the family's been farming and doing other things there. On my wife's family, they were probably pretty much the same. They arrived in Canterbury as maids and promptly walked over to the west coast, which is through a mountain range. It was no easy trek, pushing hand carts to become part of the gold rush and those sort of things. And they became miners, so they are west coasters.
Where did they head? Like Hokitika or Westport or something like that?
They headed, in fact, to some of them headed to Reefton and some of them headed to Westport.
Right.
And
do you know what? When you were just
family history there.
Wow, that's amazing.
When you were just saying that, I just thought when you were saying about pushing the carts through the mountain, and I was imagining it, and you just think, no wonder, when kids today, and even like our generation, you're like, oh, I've got it so hard, I'm so stressed, life's so difficult, and you just think, no wonder our grandparents used to say, you don't know you're bloody born, lady, because it's so true, isn't it? Imagine doing that.
Let me give you an example from my mother. My mother was born on an outback farm in Hawke's Bay in the 1920s, and she was the only child to farmers. The nearest town of any repute was Porongahau, which was 13 miles away, but the main town was Waipakarau, which was 40 miles away. They didn't send her to school when she was 5 because they thought she was too small to ride the horse. So she started school at 6, and she had a horse called Molly, and she had to ride that 6 miles to school when she was 6 years old. Nobody else was there. That's after she had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to do the farm chores because there was no electricity or anything like that. And then she had to ride back home after. If she fell off the horse, she was so small, she had to wait, and a swagger, which would be I don't know what you'd call a swagger in international parlance, but it's sort of a tramp, I guess. They would come and put her back on the horse if they were passing, because there was quite a few itinerant land workers. When she turned 9, when she rode back from school, she had to take a pack horse across 2 rather large gullies and across a plateau to where Fijian scrub cutters were cutting. So she took the supplies twice a week to scrub cutters, riding a horse after school, taking a pack horse. These people didn't speak English, but they would give her a cup of cocoa with condensed milk and unload the supplies and give her a list. And she'd ride back again, often arriving in winter back at night. Now, you don't see that sort of thing happening these days. No person in their right mind would say,
at 9,
ride your horse at night with a pack horse across uncharted country to scrub cutters. The scrub cutter camp would be moving, of course, because they're cutting the bush.
That's unbelievable. What a story.
Was your childhood, I mean, I know you probably didn't ride a pack horse to school, Gordy, but how does your childhood compare to that? I mean, just briefly,
Well, my childhood was split between going to the farm and living in Wellington. So it was probably pretty much urbane life. And I mean, when I was 11 or 12 at the latest, I would go to the farm and they thought nothing of giving me a .22 rifle and a handful of bullets and saying, go out and amuse yourself. This farm was 2,000 acres, back country. They never knew where I was. I was just wandering over. They just hoped that I'd turn up for tea.
Yeah.
And I did. So I had those sort of experiences.
Oh, that's unreal, isn't it? Yeah.
I love stories about people's lives as they go back through the generations and just seeing how it varies and things. And and have you got children of your own?
I have. I've got 2 daughters.
Yeah.
And I have got 5 grandchildren.
I hope you sent them to the school on the pack horse in Wellington.
No, they go to school in the vehicle.
Yes.
Yeah. They do put their foot down if they have to walk.
They don't know they're born, do they, Gordy?
They don't.
I want to just ask you, I'm sorry, I didn't write this in the notes, and I hope it doesn't catch you off guard, and if it does, we'll just cut it out. Don't worry about it. But when you saw our podcast that time, what made you say, you need to get an old school Kiwi on the show? Why did you say that?
The reason I said that is that I think a lot of podcasts devote themselves to how they see the world and how they see New Zealand, but it's not how I see New Zealand. I accept that you see it in a certain way, and I accept that everybody comes in a certain way. They all have different experiences. But for myself and the people that I know, been here a few generations, they see it differently.
Can you tell me how you see it? How do you see New Zealand?
New Zealand is, as a country, to be a Kiwi, you have to instinctively know how things work. But I don't think the podcast, because people haven't been here long enough, but to become a Kiwi, you have to evolve to become a Kiwi. Like I suspect in any other culture, you evolve there. And I noticed that podcasts are very complimentary about the country, but they don't have the element of evolving to become a Kiwi.
Yeah, I understand that, yeah. What does it take to become a Kiwi? I mean, I know that's a huge question, but...
What is it?
Yeah, I want to be a Kiwi.
Well, what it takes... This is in my view, of course, and I'm not a sociologist. What it takes, in my view, is that it's a process, and some people never become Kiwis, and some people become Kiwis a lot later. If you're born here, you're already sort of down the track, because from the very moment you don't know anything else. If I go back to the country as a socially, geographically isolated country, people instinctively know we can't go anywhere really. So there's a bond with nature. To be a Kiwi, and when you become a Kiwi, you form a bond with the outdoors, with nature. It's instinctive there. So when you're seeing something, you think, that's not too bad. I like that. It might be a mountain range or a forest, or you just feel comfortable in nature. That's what I think when you get there. And then on the sociological side, to be a Kiwi, it's all about the people. New Zealand is like a big community. Everybody sort of looks out for each other. It's the people, it's the people, it's the people, as the Maori proverb would say. So if you don't have that, it's the people in you, and you don't have the nature element in you, the outdoors, you ain't going to make it. Right. You'll be a New Zealander because you can get your residency, but you won't be a Kiwi.
No, that's what I've always found with New Zealanders. Like when there's a tragedy or anything like that, everyone pulls together.
They
and
do.
It reminmes me of when my dad used to talk about being, in the Second World War in the UK and how everyone pulled together. And that's kind of missing in the UK now. It does. They do pull together, but not quite the same as what it feels like it was in the olden days and what it does here in New Zealand.
Yeah, it does feel like that. Yeah. I think so too. Yeah. Just that community feel. Yeah,
it does. It's just like even when the postie, like this morning, I was in the shower and the postie walks into the house and she's going, "Hello, is anyone home?" And I just love that type of thing. In England, you just wouldn't dare open a door, would you?
No.
And she'd bring biscuits for the dog and things like that. I love that type of.
I know.
That,
and
I know she's a rural postie,
got
but
that,
it's great.
But it's just lovely to experience that. And also, Gordy, I loved when I was talking to you. You were saying, and I loved what you said about this, about you just get on with it. You just do what you have to do and get on with it.
Yeah. Stop
don't
moaning.
you? Yeah. Stop bloody moaning.
Yeah. I can see. I can see why the Kiwis say whinging poms. Because when you first come over, it's like, oh, it's not like that at home. Well, you don't do this at home, and it's like, you're not at home. You're in New Zealand, mate.
Yeah.
The inside voice for a Kiwi would said, well, "Go back again. Didn't you look at a map or read the internet before you came?"
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
It says 100%. It's going to be here. It's not that you can't talk about weather. But for some perverse reason, it seems to be the only conversational opener that a lot of people have. Oh, isn't the weather bad? Yeah, don't you have weather where you come from? But if you're going to talk about weather in a typical Kiwi parlance, it would be, oh, bloody hell, look at the weather. I was planning to play golf or go tramping or fishing, and let's put the mockers on it. Yeah. So you're talking about weather in relation to something else, or damn, look at this weather. I was going to go to a wedding, or you could say, geez, I'm glad this rain's here because I bought this coat and now I can use it. Sort of the weather is
Oh, I can't be doing with that though, Gordy. I can't be doing with that when you just want to have a good moan and say, bloody pouring down, and they go, yeah, but the garden needs it, and you're like, oh, shut up, never mind now.
The thing is,
because us Kiwis would say, yeah, look at this rain, it keeps the dust down.
Yeah, exactly.
It's liquid sunshine. What are we on about?
Yeah. I was reading something the other day about the British and the weather, and one of the reasons why they talk about the weather, it's basically a conversation starter. That's all it is. And if you can get through those first few pleasantries with an English person or British about weather, then you start talking about something else, hopefully. And that side of it, that's what that
like
British thing is that's why you always talk about the weather, because it's a conversation starter. I can understand how it can get other cultures and things their backup and stuff, because it's like, that's what you seem to talk about.
Mind you, saying that, Bri, in Taranaki, Gordy, that's all they talk about. All they want to talk about is the wind. It's just like the wind this, the wind that. When we first got here, some guy said to me, oh, it's a sow nor'wee westerly, and I was just like, it just went right over my head.
There's a sou'wester coming around the mountain.
I'd never heard that saying before. So,
of course, to be fair, rain is very important to farmers. So farmers will talk about not enough rain or too much rain. It never seems to be the right amount of rain, because rain is grass, and grass is cows, and cows is milk, and milk is money.
Exactly. Yeah. I always remember talking to a farmer. I think I've said it before. It's like, what would you're always moaning about the weather, that it's too dry, it's too windy, it's too wet, and then they say 19 degrees and it rains at night and sunny in the day. And that's all we want. The perfect world. Yeah.
So, Gordy, you told me that you've done loads. I'd love to talk to you about your coal mining down at the mines. I'd love to talk about that, but we haven't got time on this podcast, but maybe we could do that another time. But because I'd love to know about that. But you did tell me that you worked for a company in HR where they brought talent over from overseas. That was right, wasn't it?
I did.
So you must have seen a lot of people come into the country. And I know we spoke briefly about it before on the email, and you've seen a lot of people not make it in New Zealand and just go home. Why would you say, what makes some people stay and make it and others just, what's the secret sauce there, do you think?
The secret is in themselves, and it depends on why they've come to New Zealand. So if I was to categorise them, bottom level you get refugees. They've got no other choice. They come to New Zealand as a refugee because of some sort of persecution or harassment or discrimination, and they've come as a refugee. They're just happy to be here. They just get on with their lives. We come up a notch. We get what I'd call economic refugees. They've got the wherefore-all, and they come to New Zealand because they've got things are conspiring against them economically, and they're here to make money. They will go, often stay for a short while, and they might go to Australia or anywhere else. Their motivation for coming is primarily economic. Then we come up another notch, and we come to the idealists who've come to New Zealand because I've seen Lord of the Rings, watched an All Black test and some other thing, and I think, yeah, that's where I want to go. These people hardly ever make it because they've come from the wrong reason. And lastly, we come to people who have done some research, they've looked at it, they've got a plan, and they come and they make it. The last group distinguish themselves from the third group by using what's known in the trade as the Goya principle, Goya, which stands for get off your ass. So the people at the top one, they get involved with their work, with their people, and they acclimatise. So that's what makes a difference. The most people who leave are in the third lot, the idealistic ones. They don't know why they're here. They can't settle down. They might go back. They might complain a lot more. It's just not what I used to. I thought I was getting something else. You know, they're all over the show.
Yeah, that's so true, though, isn't it? I totally agree with that. That's a good analogy of the people that come here.
Yeah, and also, like we said before, it was just like you do meet people and you feel for them because they're coming over, like they might have problems with their marriage, or they're hoping that New Zealand is going to fix that, and you're like, well, it can't, can it? It can't
fix those things that people. I remember a guy saying to me in England. And he just said, it's going to be no different over there than what it is over here.
Yeah.
I could understand what he meant, but we always had that travel feel in our blood that we wanted to do something and move somewhere.
Yeah. And like you said at the very beginning of this interview, this chat is like, we came, I'm not just saying like, oh yes, we're perfect, but we came because we loved nature. We wanted that space, and we wanted just that old feel of that community, and just
a step back in time, but not in time.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's back to sort of real standards and sort of the way people talk to each other.
Yeah, you have to put an overlay on that of the geographical isolation and sort of history as well. The geographical isolation, if you're in London, a 3-hour flight would easily get you to Rome, easily get you past Berlin, probably get you up to Warsaw, Scandinavia. So there's a lot of people. New Zealand's pretty empty by and large once you get out of the big cities.
Yep.
So you have to be sure that you can deal with living on an island miles from anywhere. Plus, it's a melting pot of ideas that everybody rubs along with everybody else. You can be your own person, but everybody rubs along. And if you're not used to those sort of things, you're not going to make it.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or if you do stay, it's going to be, it's going to be like quite hard, isn't it? For the first few years
I've met people that, mainly you meet English people, expats and things like that, and they It's like, oh, it's not the same. And it's like, well, why would it be the same? It's
I
like when I go to the
know.
bar, the
Why
bar's
would
not the
you
same.
say that?
Why is it going to be the same? You know, it's not a 17th century pub
Why
you're going
would
to.
you say that?
Yeah, I
It's
know,
just
but
baffling.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
And then it's like when they try it and make it the same. And some people do that. We talked about this before, didn't we? About, how people, they have communities and, it's fair enough. You're going to have friends and everything, but they don't go out of that little bubble that they're in. So they've like made this like mini England in New Zealand
exactly.
And that's quite bizarre as well. So it's, we were talking about, and I loved this. You said to me, Liz, have you ever heard of the acronym FORD?
Yes. FORD, F-O-R-D.
I'd never heard of that.
FORD is how a New Zealander would approach a conversation with other people. And we don't have to talk about the weather because first off, and it depends on how well you know the person, of course, you would introduce about people, family, usually. Family. How's the family getting on? How are you doing? The first conversation touch point is about people, about family. You'd ask about those. Obviously, not if you're going to the petrol station in some way about town. You don't ask them about that, but just generally with people that you know and you're connecting with and building up rapport with. The next thing is occupation. So if you can't ask about the family, you talk about, what do you do for a quid, mate? Or how do you knock out the pingers? So you talk about what they do for a job as a touch point. If that doesn't resonate, you can always talk about recreation. What do you do on your days off? How do you fill in the weekend? That sort of stuff. So you would make conversation regarding what they do for recreational. And lastly, D is for dreams, which means, the other things. What are you doing for your holiday? Have you got a holiday planned, or, going to paint the house, or, what aspirational things. So Kiwis tend to talk about those things there in that descending order as well. So if you ever get stuck and you want to make a conversation, you just got to think, which one am I going to talk about? So if you come up to a stranger, you go, well, I'm not going to talk about the family, but I can say, how do you earn a quid, mate? And talk about that. Or you can say, how do you spill in your spare time? Do you travel? So it gives you things. Nothing about weather in there, you'll know.
No, there's no W.
I'm a weatherman.
That's what I'm going to talk about.
Yes. So they're sort of touch points that you'll see that if you're Maori, family is very important. So they're always going to start on family because they want to know where they fit in the tribal structure. Of course, if they're a traditional Maori, they will know. So I don't know if you've had much to do with the Maori, which might be another aspect you might delve into. But their meeting house, the ridgepole, is the backbone of the iwi, the tribe. And the ribs that come down represent the branches of the family. So if you talk to a Maori who's traditional, he can go into the meeting house and he can show you which rib is his and where he is in relation to everybody else.
Yeah.
So family, really important. They used to have something called the telephone book game. For those who can remember a telephone book, when two Maoris who didn't know each other, they would keep talking, mentioning names because they're trying to find out where they fit in to the thing. Still they say, bingo, yes, that's a common ancestor. So family, very important there. They call it whakapapa, their genealogy. So that's conversation starters. You can use it anywhere.
Yeah, and since you told me that, I've really noticed it. When I'm talking to other New Zealanders, and I notice that that's one of the. I keep thinking, oh yeah, there it is. Talking about the family or talking about their dreams, or it's really interesting that you should say that.
It's a great thing because it's a good thing. So sometimes, like you say, conversation gets stuck. So you've only got to think of forward, haven't you? You can pick, like you say, pick one of them. Yeah. Oh, that's great.
So before we go, I just want to say to you, if I was going to come over here, if I was like, I'm going to come to New Zealand, I really want to make a go of it, Gordy, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes, what would you say to me? What piece of advice would you give to me if I was moving to New Zealand?
The first thing I'd say, if it was at all possible, that would be visit New Zealand first. I think the people who have done a visit to New Zealand and had a bit of a shifty round, seen what's there, always succeed better than those who don't. That's because they understand that it's a 3-hour flight to get here. There's not a lot of people here, that nature is important, and they get a feel, as opposed to those who have seen a rugby match and arrive on the plane. So they understand it. So that would be the first thing to do it. The second thing is when you arrive, take a bit of a trip around if you haven't done it, but if you have, seek a job, any job that you're going to meet New Zealanders with. So get an understanding how the workplace works, how the employment law works, everything's there. It might only be for 3 or 4 months, do a volunteer work if you like, but come in contact with Kiwis. A major mistake I find is some people who come here congregate into their own communities. That's all right in some Polynesian, because that's how they work and they've got a long livity in New Zealand. But the newer ones, if they congregate in their own community, they never make it to the next step. So you have to go and get a job, even if it's a much lesser hourly rate or salary, just so you can come in contact with New Zealanders and understand how everything works here. Once you've got over that barrier, then you're quids in. You understand you can do something. Now, New Zealand is a skill-based country. It doesn't look for deep skills, it looks for wide skills. So a lot of people come here very specialist in their skills, and they can only put bolt A on bolt nut B. New Zealand doesn't want that. They want a person who can put all sorts of bolts on all sorts of nuts. Yeah. So they want wide skills, not deep skills. So if you've got a deep skill and you try and get a job with that deep skill, then you're basically screwed. Yeah. What happens is if you've got a wide skill, then the opportunities are boundless for a person who's got a deep skill once they understand how the country works. Yeah. So that would be my second bit. My third one, I refer to my earlier statement about the Goya principle.
Totally get off your ass.
Yeah, get off your ass.
Yeah. I was just get off your ass and do something.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's so true.
Stop bloody moaning.
Expose
you to that.
I found that when I came here, I haven't even told Liz half the stories when you sit in at Smoko on a building site and you're the only Brit guy there, and it's just the stories that come out and the interaction, and you actually start to learn their humour, and then you kind of like, that's what I can see what, and it's such a huge learning curve. It really is.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend everyone coming over as a tradie, but it's a great place to start.
Get in the septic tank. Go on, get off your ass and get in the septic tank.
Get it cleaned out. Go on. Yeah.
Oh, Gordy, I've absolutely loved talking to you. Have you got anything else that you want to ask?
I've got lots, but we're like 40 minutes, getting nearly 40 minutes into it.
Should we do a part two? Should we have you back and just...
If your fans want it, I'm happy to do another one. I can do it on anything.
Yeah, it's fascinating to talk to you, and I just love all that history and
that's what I'd love to know, because I'm guessing you grew up in the 1960s, 50s, 60s sort of thing.
Yeah.
So sort of see or hear more of that time about New Zealand, because it always fascinates me. When I was a kid, we knew about New Zealand because of Anchor, which was the butter and the milk and stuff that would come over to England, and the New Zealand lamb and all those sort of things, and we just we always had Anchor butter on the table, and it was just like what's wrong with English butter? But it was because we had such a close connection. And then the EU hit in the 70s, and I'd love to on the next one talk what it was like to see that side of New Zealand sort of re-establish themselves and how they did it. That would be great.
So let's do that. Let's meet back
Excellent.
up. Well, Gordy, thank you so much for joining us.
It's been an honour to have you here.
Yeah,
It really
has.
has.
It's been fantastic.
Well, I don't know about an honour.
It is.
Yeah, see, I'd be a bit of a little cringe.
No, it's not easy to come onto a podcast and chat. It's just, and we really, really appreciate you. And I keep saying that, but we do, because you're just teaching our audience and all, new things and giving a different perspective that we can't possibly give, because we're not born here. We can't do that. We can tell you what it's been like for the last 12 years, but I really, really appreciate you coming on and just sharing that with us.
No,
thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's
we'll speak
brilliant.
to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
And
Thank you.
see you
Bye,
next
Gordy.
time.
Bye.
Thank
See you.
Daddy, I love him. Mother thanks you. Right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Hello.